Uh, Now I would like to ask each one of the panelists a question, and then we open the floor. But before I do that, there's one remark I heard. Maybe this is something we may need to look into it. And the myth that President W. Bush was the first one to talk about a Palestinian state, I think it is not accurate. Because in 2000, I interviewed President Clinton after the Camp David talks collapsed, and I asked him, Mr. President, you urged the two parties not to take any unilateral steps that may affect the outcome of the peace negotiations, and now you said you want to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So he looked at me, he said, when I go to inaugurate our embassy in Jerusalem, I hope I would be also inaugurating our embassy in the state of Palestine, and that's on the record, and it was President Clinton who said it, but it went unreported at the time, but it's published in Al-Hayat newspaper at the time. So I just want to bring that to your attention, since both of you talked about President W. Bush, but maybe he was the first one to talk about a Palestinian state as part of a package, not as, but just for the record. Mr. Abdel Ghaffar, you know, I would like to take this opportunity to ask you one question after what I heard what you had to say. No one can challenge how close the relationship was between Washington, no matter who the president was at the White House, and the president of Egypt and President Mubarak. And in 2 weeks, the president of the United States came publicly and said Mr. Mubarak had to step down. Now means now. Your country is a close friend of the United States. Do you trust that Washington will stand by you if you're in trouble? You're not closer to Washington than Hosni Mubarak.
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, I think this is a hypothetical question. So based
hypothetical based on facts.
On facts. On Egyptian facts. I think, you know, every country has national interest. As Ambassador Curtis said in the previous panel, so our relationship based on mutual interests. It is not only on a trust, because in real politics, you know, sometimes you have to depend on mutual interests. I think the United States started realizing the change of the geopolitics of the Gulf, and started realizing how it is important to establish a strong relationship with not only Bahrain, with the Gulf countries, because I have to remind that there was a deep rift in GCC relationship, strategic thinking in 2003 when United States decided to invade Kuwait. To invade Iraq, and we were against that, because we knew at the time that it will be created a very big strategic mistake to go and invade Iraq. And I think now the evidence shows that we are right.
It depends how you look into it. Some people may say the Arab Spring is because of overthrowing Saddam. So it depends how you look at it.
So America is there in the Gulf, establishing strong relationship with Gulf countries, mainly for their own national interest, and we are doing same thing, national interest, but between GCC and there's mutual interest. So we work on that basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I have a question for Mr. Kurdoudi, and since Mark made some comments and wouldn't let some of the remarks you made, I hope you're wrong about Jews and Zionists in the U.S., because some people may found that offensive. So I will refrain from answering that, because our colleague on the panel did that. Let me ask you a question. You talked about the Palestinian issue as the main issue poisoning U.S.-Arab relationship. And I'm not trying to minimize this issue, but since the beginning of the so-called Arab Spring, the issue of Palestine is not an issue yet. I have not seen an American flag being burned by demonstrators, whether in Homs in Syria, or in Benghazi, or in Bahrain, or anywhere else. So are we still talking about the same issues, and are we outdated so much. We're so detached from the new realities of the Middle East. And again, I'm not minimizing the importance of the Palestinian issue. This may be deferred maybe when the dust settles. But how could you please explain that everything else right now that is going on is about the Palestinian issue and the perceived bias of the United States towards Israel?
Alors, effectivement, lors des révoltes arabes, on n'a pas mis en exergue le problème palestinien, mais il est sous-jacent. Moi, je voudrais bien expliquer que ce problème est sous-jacent dans tous les pays arabes. Et même quand on n'en parle pas, il est dans nos cœurs. Ça, il faut bien comprendre cela. Et donc, effectivement, lorsqu'il y a eu les révoltes arabes, il y avait des choses plus urgentes, comme la démocratie, et se débarrasser des dictatures qui, pendant des décennies, ont exercé leur influence sur ces pays. Donc, d'abord, la démocratie. Ensuite, pour les jeunes qui sont parmi nous ce matin, trouver des emplois, le problème de l'emploi et le problème de l'avenir. Et donc, c'était effectivement les problèmes les plus urgents, la démocratie, les problèmes économiques, les problèmes sociaux, le recouvrement de la dignité. Moi, j'ai été très sensible lorsque tous ces jeunes et tous ceux qui ont fait les révoltes ont d'abord parlé de dignité humaine. Nous voulons recouvrer notre dignité parce qu'elle a été bafouée pendant des décennies. Mais cela n'empêche que le problème palestinien est sous-jacent à tous les... Et je ne voudrais pas polémiquer avec mon collègue M. Kurzer, mais quand ce matin, il a dit que les États-Unis ont tout fait pour résoudre le problème palestinien, je m'excuse, M. Kurzer. Les États-Unis ont fait un veto à toutes les résolutions favorables à la Palestine. Les États-Unis ont voté contre l'entrée de la Palestine à l'UNESCO et ont même coupé les crédits. Vous vous rendez compte? Voilà une association scientifique, culturelle, et les États-Unis ne trouvent pas mieux que de lui couper les crédits. C'est quelque chose, moi, qui m'a révolté. Et je tiens à le dire à M. Kurzer. Et concernant l'adhésion à l'ONU, les États-Unis ont tout fait pour que la Palestine ne présente pas sa demande, et évidemment, ils vont voter non. Non, M. Kurzer, les États-Unis n'ont rien fait pour résoudre le problème palestinien.
Merci, points well made. Question, Ambassador. Okay, question to you, Ambassador Kurzer. Do you fear, and I think people in the Middle East are starting to wonder about this, that the lack of progress and the peace front between the Israelis and the Palestinians, Washington is trying to lead from behind. They don't want to take the lead in the new realities in the Middle East right now. They want the indigenous movement to take place. Washington is keen, the president from the way, trying to distance Washington from Arab leaders. Do you think this may lead to Washington totally disengaging from the Middle East? Can the Middle East afford that? And is that a prominent thinking right now in Washington? We see the president going to Australia, Asia Pacific. They have new priorities. Do you feel that there is a trend right now in Washington to stay away from the Middle East for a while for economic issues? They don't want to spoil the Arab Spring, and at the same time, there is nothing you can do about the peace fronts. The Palestinians cannot get their act together. They're not speaking from one voice at this moment. And they would say even Prime Minister Netanyahu is not interested, as Mr. Raikat called him, a non-negotiator. Are these legitimate concerns that Washington may again disengage and distance itself from Middle Eastern issues?
There is no serious debate in Washington about disengaging from the Middle East or from the Middle East peace process. One can see some fringe arguments made that we have to invest our time and efforts elsewhere. We see now a very significant enhanced set of relationships between the United States and Asia. We are, in fact, a Pacific country as much as we are an Atlantic country. And some Pacific countries have suggested that it's about time that the United States paid more attention to them. But, you know, we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Are you sure?
Words, yes, I think we can. The United States can maintain our interests in the Pacific, which are rather substantial, and we can maintain our interests in this region. What I tried to emphasize in the earlier panel is when I mentioned the words leading from behind, is that the United States, I think in a very healthy way, the administration in a very healthy way, since the beginning of the Arab awakening, has understood, number one, the differentiation between the various manifestations of this awakening. In other words, there's not one answer that the United States policy can offer to each of the countries in which people are striving for democracy and change. And number two, that the United States, I think, in a very healthy manner, has understood that it is not going to determine the agenda of change within the Arab world. It's going to be determined in this region. It's going to be determined by each of the peoples who are now agitating for more freedoms. That does not translate, however, into a withdrawal of the United States from the interests that we pursue in this region, be they strategic interests or be they the interests in advancing the peace process. I would stack up the U.S. efforts on behalf of peace in the last 30 years against any other country in the world, and I think we did okay. Now, there are certainly periods in which even I would argue we could have done more. We're in one of those periods now, but I think that the efforts exerted by Henry Kissinger, by Jimmy Carter, by George H.W. Bush, by Bill Clinton, at the end of the Bush administration, by Condoleezza Rice, and even by Barack Obama in this administration suggest that the United States has nothing to be ashamed about for having tried to broker Arab-Israeli peace. We are not satisfied that we haven't succeeded, but I would stack up those efforts against anyone and suggest that we've tried our best, and I hope we continue to try.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kurtzuk. My question to Mr. Araikat right now. When the Soviet Union collapsed, people said the Middle East will no longer be the same, and it remained the same. When Saddam invaded Kuwait, I remember columnists talking about the Middle East will never be the same, and it remained the same. Somehow, maybe the invasion of Iraq and the toppling of Saddam Hussein may have triggered waves that, yes, those pictures of seeing an Arab leader being arrested, it undermined and the myth that Arab leaders cannot be brought down. Do you think that played a role? Maybe it's a delayed effect after 8 years, and this has it was a catalyst, and it encouraged people to move against their leaders.
I think I addressed this question in my previous lecture this morning, and I really believe that anyone who says Arabs are not ready for democracy is a racist. And I said that the West is reshaping, the Arabs are reshaping, so the West must reshape. It wasn't me who went to Saddam Hussein and hugged him and supplied him with arms while he was fighting a crazy war against Iran, and then turned him into a bad dictator.
But you hugged him when he invaded Kuwait.
No, I did not.
Chairman Arafat did.
I did not. I did not. We did not. Anyway, the point is, the changes are happening. People can choose between asking themselves in Washington, Mark, one question: what can we do to make the right people win? Or be shocked, surprised, bring the talking points that's eloquent to attack and be aggressive and so on. That's your business. We're about choices. But I believe people should ask themselves one question in Washington, in Jericho, in Jerusalem, in Morocco, in Iceland. What can we do to make the right people win? Two things: peace and democracy. No one is against the two-state solution in the Arab world. Can't you see? Our failure to bring about a two-state solution is going to cost so much and made the price so heavy in the future. Anyway, I just want to comment, four comments. And I was watching a movie, Mark, recently, Wall Street, the new one, Michael Douglas. He asks a question: what's madness? And he answers. He says, repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And that reminded me of a joke about a Palestinian and Israeli who went to see a cowboy Western movie. So they sit there watching the movie. The star is really riding his horse so fast. And the Israeli, as usual, provocative, looks at the Palestinian and tells him $20. He will fall from the back of his horse in 1 minute. And without thinking, as usual, the Palestinian said, you're on. So in 59 seconds, he's down. The Palestinian carries the $20 and wants to give it to the Israeli. The Israeli says, no, I can't take it. The Palestinian says, why? You won. He said, no, I can't take it. My conscience, I've seen this movie before. So the Palestinian looks at him and says, what do you think? I also saw it, but I thought he would learn from his mistakes. and why we failed to bring the two-state solution is that the U.S. up till today failed to have Israel accountable to peace. Settlements in accordance with the Fourth Geneva Convention is a war crime. Settling on the lands of the supposed to be a Palestinian state is undermining the two-state solution. Why can't the United States pressure Israel, hold Israel accountable? For God's sakes, when the United States convened the biggest coalition in the history of this region against Saddam Hussein, 3 countries were excluded from this coalition. 3 countries. North Korea, Libya, Israel. Those who fired back from Tel Aviv at the Iraqi missiles were not Israeli fingers. It was Dutch, German, and American fingers.
May I have a follow-up question to what you said? Okay, go ahead.
Just please let me finish. As far as the region changing, Iran woke up one morning, for the first time in 1,300 years, and found a superpower who took off all their limitations, east, west, south, and north. And if you were them, you will seek to be a regional power. Saddam was out, Taliban, 16 Iranian ambassadors were beheaded between 1996 and 2001. No one knew about it. They could not miss with the Taliban and with Saddam. So they took it out free of charge. And now, for me as a Palestinian, they don't have in Tehran a Mecca Day or a Bahrain army. They have a Palestine army and a Jerusalem Day. That's what's in it for me. That's why I try to interfere and try to achieve the two-state solution. As far as what's happening in the West Bank, okay? Palestinians, I don't know, we may be different terminology of calling things, but you can define for me, Mark, okay? If you were living in the same area and your license plate in your car is a different color, your ID card, because you're not Jewish, is different. Mosques are being burned in the West Bank today. 40% settler violence increased. Trees are being burned. And from all people on earth, Israelis should stand up and stop this nonsense. You should not cover for it. That's apartheid. That's racism. Occupation corrupts.
Okay, points well made before, Mr. Araika.
And the last point, and I really mean it, America will not negotiate for me and the Israelis. I don't want them to make decisions for me and the Israelis. They cannot. They will not. We don't want them. There are decisions that are required from Palestinians and Israelis. We want, Israel is part of America's domestic life. That's the truth. Israel is my occupier as a Palestinian. Does that make me part of America's domestic life? Think about it. I'm not going to disappear. So the best thing for the United States is to ensure the implementation of the two-state solution, agreement signed. And without holding the Israeli Prime Minister accountable, without the United States stop treating Israel as a country above the laws of man, I believe the wrong people will win for the time being, and this region will be driven further and further in the hands of extremists and goes into violence and counter-violence. And the key here is not to isolate Israel, is not to delegitimize Israel, is not to recognize Israel. The key here is to say to Israel, it's going to be two states. Occupation must end.
Okay, I want to make an exception and make a follow-up to what you have said. Just a quick remark, and I would expect a quick remark as well from you. You talked about, when you say Arabs are not ready for democracy, it's a racial remark that you make. I absolutely. I agree with you. But let me ask you one question. Do you think democracy can flourish in the absence of Democrats? You need Democrats. And let me ask you one question. The first democratic elections that took place in the Palestinian territories, you lost. Hamas won. So how would you explain that? I mean, don't you want to have a process of educating people about how to practice democracy? Do you have Democrats right now?
Yes, we do.
And how would you explain that?
Yes, we do. It's true. My party lost the elections in 2006. That's democracy. Hamas won.
But you're still in power in terms of
Wait a minute. We had two elections. We're a presidential system and a parliament. We won the presidency. They won the elections. But you know what? Let's face it. Democracy worked. Hamas failed. I recall being elected to represent Jericho and the Jordan Valley. 1 seat constituency. And I was given the chance that day, Mr. Harb, to speak on behalf of the loyal opposition. When Mr. Haniya came to present his government to the Council for a vote of confidence, I was assigned to respond to him. I told him, sir, today you are not the Prime Minister of Hamas. You are my Prime Minister. You are my wife's Prime Minister. You are the Prime Minister of all Palestinians. Please act as such. I reminded him that when Imam Khomeini came to power in Iran, the first thing he did after changing the name of his country, after changing the educational, social, religious fabric of his society, he said in the communique that the Islamic Republic of Iran honors all commitments in the contractual nature. So did Nelson Mandela. So does anybody who comes to government. He responded to me by saying, since we won the elections, you must cancel agreements with Israel. The UN must change its charter. The Arabs must cancel their Arab Peace Initiative. And intellectuals, Arab intellectuals like you, did not stand up to help me and say that's not how things happen in international relations. That's not what happened when governments changes. If we are part of this international system as Palestinians, we owe some money. Some people owe us some money. So we cannot stand and say because we won the elections, we're not going to be committed to all the contractual nature. That was the failure, not democracy. Arabs are Democrat, they know democracy, they want their dignity, and they will restore it. Whether we like it or not, I think we should be helping them in order to minimize the suffering and the number of those killed.
Great.
But anyone who says Arabs are not ready for democracy are happy with the continuation of the Saddam Husseins and the Gaddafis and the rest of the...
Thank you. Thank you. Octavia, I have a quick question for you. You said that last year we didn't have the president you mentioned, and we don't know what's going to happen next year. However, the same issues remain. Do you think next year, if we were to convene here again, we may have other leaders probably gone? But are we going to talk about the same issues? Are we going to talk about the lack of progress in the Middle East? Are we going to be talking about corruption? Are we going to talk about the threat of Islamism? Issues are not moving. We're changing people, but we're still living with the same obstacle, the same impediments over the decades.
Well, we're barely changing, so I don't know how you can expect to see results yet. I mean, people are still trying to stand on their feet. I'm a little surprised that you even ask a question like this. In the middle of those revolutions and uprisings, some of them are still ongoing. Of course, Egypt and Tunisia are going to be the biggest tests, but it's a little bit too early to really understand the impact of what happened and how the new leadership is going to take those countries further and the rest of the region as well. So yes, I am of the opinion that next year we might have even more leaders fall. I'm pretty sure, actually, that we will have a different landscape very soon. It's very obvious. What I want to talk about is the issues as in, yes, corruption and lack of transparency and lack of freedoms and all that. Of course, these are issues to be dealt with immediately. And I think the people who are aware of the importance of this moment are already dealing with this. But you still have those people who are living in the past. They're still living in 2010, let's say, unable to realize that change has started and they need to move along with it. Those people need to either change or get out of the way, and I think they will get the message soon. The other issues that I think we've been mentioning here, when we say Palestine is, at the inside or at the bottom or in the hearts of Arabs, and yes, that is very true. But the problem is the definition of that changes not just from country to country, it changes from person to person. Remember that Osama bin Laden also led Al-Qaeda in the name of the Palestinians who are oppressed and all that. So that, to me, doesn't ring true anymore. We need to find a new language. When we say, for example, as Arabs, we say, Palestine is in my heart, I want to help Palestine. Answer the question that was just asked. What did you do for Palestine when the U.S. stopped aid to Palestine because it asked to be recognized at the United Nations? Very simple question. What? As individuals, as organizations, as countries, as Arab League, what? That's what needs to be answered. We need to stop the empty rhetoric. I'm sorry to say that. I call it empty rhetoric because to me it's not getting anywhere. I hear it and it's repeated and people repeat it and then we teach it to our children and their children and everybody says the same thing, Palestine, Palestine. What have you done for Palestine? How come there is no Palestine yet? How come in areas like the West Bank, like Gaza, like camps, Palestinian camps in Syria, in Lebanon, how come you have about 3 generations? We're going into the 4th generation living in the same space. This is a space that's going to explode. It is exploding. So we need to start really talking sense. Instead of empty rhetoric, we need to talk sense, and we need to say, if indeed Palestine is at the heart of the relationship of the Arab world with the US or any other country, then prove it. Then show it. Don't just keep giving people that rhetoric, because obviously the street is just not responding to this. And I want to give one quick example about leaders and how they don't listen. I remember my first singing class. I have a terrible voice, but when I was a kid, we had to sing. And I remember I was singing from all my heart. I was really enjoying that lesson, and apparently I was so awful that the teacher had to stop the whole class, and she came to me, she said, "What's wrong with you? Why are you screaming?" I said, "I don't realize I'm screaming. I'm just enjoying the song." And she said, No, you have to understand. When you sing, you don't have to hear yourself. The most important lesson about singing is hearing the person next to you. Do you hear that person? And that taught me a lesson, not just in singing, but in life. When you're speaking, when you're singing, there are others singing with you. There are others speaking. They have opinion. You have to respect that. You have to listen to that. So next time an Arab leader, here's my advice, if I may give an advice. Next time an Arab leader wants to make an announcement, instead of promoting themselves from, let's say, example, not pointing at anyone, just an example. Instead of promoting yourself from prince to king, or from sultan to king, or from king to super king, or whatever it is, consider demoting yourself. Consider making yourself a person like the other people. One man, one citizen of your own country. I think this is good advice. If people start thinking this way, becoming your own citizen. And I think some leaders in the Arab world did practice that in the old days. And unfortunately, we only read about them in books. But I think this is something that Arabs need to start practicing. Becoming your people, be the citizen of your country, demote yourself instead of keep promoting yourself to positions that are just sounding hollow.
Thank you, Octavia. Mark.